Hello, and welcome to the Project Elected podcast. Project Elect is a nonpartisan nonprofit whose goal is pretty simple. We want to get more Latter-day Saint women involved in public service. On this podcast, we interview amazing Latter-day Saint women who are involved in public service. Hi, my name is Audrey Perry-Martin. I'm the founder of Project Elect and the host of this podcast. I am thrilled today to introduce you to our podcast guest. Her name is Mackin. I have been working with her for a little while on the Bolder Way Forward, and we'll talk about what that is in a minute, sub-spoke for boards and commissions and trying to get Utah women on more boards and commissions. And she's the leader of that sub-spoke, among many other things that we will talk about. So, Anne, thank you so much for being here today and for being so passionate about what you do.
Audrey, I was so excited when you reached out to me and asked me to come on your podcast to talk about my personal favorite, my passion, which is helping women step into what I call the political arena. And a great place to start your career in the political arena is getting on a board or a commission.
Mm-hmm. Why is that? Tell me why you think that's such a great place to start.
A couple of years ago, Audrey, a small group of women in Salt Lake City started an organization called Utah Women Run. And it was formed because several women who were serving in elected office, they found they were always being asked the same question. How did you get elected? How did you do that? What are the steps I need to take so I could serve, so I could get elected? So many of these women got together in a dusty old boardroom at the YWCA, and we sat down and decided what we were going to do is create a small organization that did one thing and one thing only, and that was help women get elected to office and how to prepare yourself for serving in office and how to get elected and how to run a campaign, how to raise money. And so over the past 16 years since Utah Women Run was founded, what I realized that a lot of women needed a little more experience in what I call the political arena. And that experience could be found by serving on a board or a commission. And let me kind of explain that to you, Audrey. There are so many boards and commissions for women to serve on. I like to think the way to start is perhaps on your local community council. Almost every city has several community councils. Salt Lake City, where I live, has 26. And so every neighborhood is represented by a community council. Then every city has their own boards and commissions. Then there's the counties. There's 29 counties in Utah, where I live. And each one of those counties has several boards and commissions for people to serve on. In the state of Utah, there are 435 state boards. There's about 10 people on every board, so that's 4,000 board seats. And then another passion for me is helping women get on nonprofit boards. And the state of Utah, last time I looked, there was 594 registered nonprofits. And so all of those boards need talented women to serve. So anyway, like you said, I am quite passionate about helping women expand their sphere of influence, serve on decision-making boards, and develop a skill set that will really help them run for office if they ever do want to run for office. That's what I've been doing for 16 years.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's a long time to be doing this and be passionate about it. And I love your enthusiasm for this. And, obviously you're preaching to the choir here because at Project Elect, we really encourage women to get on boards and commissions because, like you said, it is such a great stepping stone to running for office.
Audrey, I want to share with you, my husband and I have 6 children. And we also have 9 grandchildren. And what I think is important as a mom, as a grandma, is how women of faith, can model service to their communities through getting on a board. So my kids always saw me running off to some board meeting or some sort of committee that I was on. When kids see their mothers actively engaged in their communities or serving on a nonprofit board, usually nonprofits are serving individuals in our communities that need support. I really feel that when kids see mom very engaged in her community and serving, I think modeling that behavior is really important. So my kids are now getting on boards and serving. My daughter, I talked to her last week. She's like, no, mom, I gotta go. I gotta go. She serves on a commission in downtown Chicago, and she's a CPA, and they help people do their taxes for free. And she's the head of that organization now. So like
That's
mother, like
incredible.
daughter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I love that because I think a lot of times, women of faith and LDS women are really committed to serving in the church and don't necessarily think about, or maybe their kids' schools. There's a lot of that too,
Mhm.
but don't really make the connection about serving on a city board or a county board. And I think it is important to model that for our kids. I've got 3 daughters, and I certainly want them to be, the type who are helping their communities and helping those around them, because that's just as valid service as any other kind, right?
I I I agree. I really do. And I think also when you serve on a board or a commission, it's actually really helpful for your own skill set. It's definitely something that you can put on your resume. And I know a lot of women who have stayed at home. I stayed at home for many, many years. I was very fortunate to be able to do that. But I was serving in elected office when I was in my stay at home years. And I really feel that when you're getting back into the workforce, having served on a board, when you have that first interview going back to work, if you can say in that interview, but you know what, for the last 4 years, I've served on my local community council or I've done this, it definitely, for me, is a way to develop your job skills, your professional skills. And I'll be honest with you, it represents very well on your resume. And you see when you apply for jobs, they're always asked what are your outside interests, and it's a great way to demonstrate to prospective employers the kind of person you are, how committed you are to your community. It helps,
hmm
I think.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also helps you make connections, right? And the more connections you have, the better. I know the church is emphasizing a lot now, talking to people outside of the faith and getting involved in your community and with other churches and with other community groups. I'm on a public service commission right now in my city, and it's such a tiny commitment, but I've met all of these people doing amazing service and all of these groups that are doing service and been able to make connections with my calling. And it's been incredible to kind of have that opportunity.
I think also, Audrey, you meet people like serving on the is it Public Service Commission? You meet people that you never would have met. And so you definitely are expanding your development of colleagues. I'd love to share a story with you about boards and commissions and an experience I had. So several years ago, I noted that in the city where I live, there was 2 openings on the local planning commission, and I thought that would be such an interesting way to serve in my community, especially as all cities are experiencing a lot of growth and development. So I sent my resume to the planning director and never heard from him. And then I reached out and left him a voicemail and called again and never heard from him. And I'm like, well, how come they're not interested in me? I'm pretty fabulous. I think I have a degree in finance, I have an MBA, I have a doctorate. I mean, gosh, I was the serving as the vice president of a technical college where I live. I was like, why aren't they responding to me? So what I did, and I call this advocate for yourself. So I called my home teacher and I'm like, I know that our city council member is your next door neighbor. Would you mind calling him and saying, I've got a great candidate for the planning commission? Because, Audrey just couldn't understand why they didn't pick me. The next day, I got a phone call from the planning director. He and I had an interview, and then I was appointed the following week by city council to the planning commission. And I served for 6 years. I loved every minute of it. It was a little time consuming, but I loved it. And it really got me involved in my city that I learned more than any job I've ever had, just because I learned about all of how cities grow, what, planning and zoning. I learned so much for myself. And I met people I never would have met. And I made friends in my community and at the city in ways that I had no idea the benefits to me. Sometimes when you see an opportunity that you would like to serve on a local board, you have to advocate for yourself. You've got to pick up the phone and call people. Last week, I was working with a woman. She was interested in actually a city council seat that had been vacated. And I told her, I said, you've got to advocate for yourself. And I gave her this list of things to do. I said, I want you to call and email all of the existing city council people, introduce yourself, advocate for yourself, go and meet the mayor, go and meet your local city council person, introduce yourself, take that person to lunch and say, I would love to be appointed to that vacancy on city council. It's not going to happen just because you send your resume in. You've got to advocate for yourself because they're not going to necessarily come knocking on your door. You got to go and knock on that door. Maybe you have to push on that door. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Find someone they know like you did and
Yes,
have
yes.
them help you. Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you say about advocating for yourself, because I think that often can be hard for some of us to advocate for ourselves. And I've been on both sides of it, where I've sent my resume in and never heard back and been confused, and been the one receiving all the resumes and not really knowing the personal connection. The somebody knows this person goes a long way, and it doesn't have to be a strong connection. It can be, I went out to lunch with this person and they were great. It builds a certain level of trust, and it makes it a lot more likely that they're going to consider you if you reach out and advocate and they know you're really interested and have met you.
It's the old networking opportunity. Use people in your network and reach out yourself. And sometimes you have to be, I don't want to say aggressive, you have to believe in yourself and say, I would like this opportunity. So, one of the things I wanted to share with you that I think is a great way for women and men to get involved is getting involved on your local community council. I have a friend, she got on her local community council. There was something she was interested in. I think they were building a park or something in her neighborhood. So she joined community council. Needless to say, this young woman was made the president of her community council within the first year, and she became an advocate for her community. Next thing you know, at the House of Representatives, there was an opportunity. She ran for her local House seat and won with a unbelievable 74% of the vote. She was reelected just this year with 75% of the vote. But the reason I shared that story, Audrey, is she just started out on her community council, got involved, got to know the people in her city. Next thing you know, she was meeting with her state senate and state rep. Next thing you know, she's in the House. I think that's just a great way to get started in your political career, whether you want to be in politics or just serve.
Well, and if you do want to be in politics, it's one of the best ways, because I think, if you're on your community council, those are the people who you need to vote for you, right? It's not your buddies at work. It's not your extended family. It's your neighbors that are going to be the ones who determine whether you get elected or not. And knowing them and having that trust with them that you're going to be looking out for them and representing them is crucial. So I love that story.
I, I agree. I also like to encourage women to look in their immediate communities for nonprofit organizations. And sometimes someone will say, I'd like to be on the Boys and Girls Club of the board or on the YWCA board. And I tell them, you really need to volunteer. A volunteer for an organization that really speaks to you. Get involved, because usually board members on a nonprofit come from the volunteers. And a lot of times a nonprofit board will be looking for someone like you, Audrey, who maybe has a legal background or maybe an HR. The nonprofit board that I serve on, we have different people from different sectors, attorneys, we have an HR person. They really come with a skill set to the board. But I'll tell you, for me, probably one of the most validating and wonderful things that I do is serve on a nonprofit and see how our small organization does really good work in the state of Utah. So I am honored to serve on that board. And it's a lot of work. It really is. there's monthly meetings and then we have other meetings and, issues come up that we need to resolve. But I always tell them, thanks for letting me serve on this nonprofit because I love it.
Yeah. I think a lot of women don't necessarily know how to start or even where to look to see what boards or commissions are open or they could apply to. What would you suggest to them? Like, how do you approach a woman who comes to you and says, I'm interested in boards and commissions, but I don't know where to start? What advice do you give?
Take a look at community councils. For example, Salt Lake City has 27, Provo has 29, Orem has 21, and the list goes down. So that's probably the first place to start is on your community council. And then each city has quite a few boards. The board could be the library board. It could be Parks and Rec. There's a lot of city boards that you can look at. And usually you can just go to the website. Most cities will list them. Sometimes you got to do a little more digging and actually call the city. Sometimes vacancies are posted. Sometimes you got to do a little sleuthing to find out. County boards. There's 29 counties in Utah, and most of those counties have quite a few boards. But here's the other thing I like to encourage women to do. I encourage them to go to, it's a matter of public record, go and see what the agenda was for the last couple of meetings and open up that agenda like, oh, these are some of the big issues right now for this committee or council. Maybe introduce yourself to some of the council members. Often there's audio recordings of past meetings, and then start attending meetings. Go and sit in the audience and listen, maybe ask some questions. Another thing is, if you are interested perhaps in being on your own city council, go to city council meetings and introduce yourself and listen, ask questions, and find out, maybe I would like to serve on my city council. The information is there in the state of Utah, and I have to credit our governor, Governor Cox. He has created an initiative to promote more women on the 435 boards in the state of Utah, and he's also removed barriers. There were a lot of barriers, nonsense barriers. The barriers are like, we don't even know why we have all these requirements. But so a lot of boards now here in my state, they have opened up the boards and removed some of the unnecessary requirements. And also state boards, like I'm going to give you an example, the Air Quality Commission. The Air Quality Commission is mandated. They have a couple of physicians, air quality experts, environmental experts, but on every board, there's usually 2 or 3 what's known as community members. You do not have to be an expert in air quality. You just need to be a citizen who says, this is of really, really interest to me. Maybe you're interested in childcare or housing. There's so many boards like that. So if it's something that you're passionate about or you would like to be a part of, often there is a non-professional community person. They like to have a couple of voices, people like you and me, just to be, on a board, but we may not be an expert on the subject, just an interested community member.
You talk about how sometimes it's hard to get on boards. What barriers do women have you seen encounter when they're applying, and how do you overcome them?
I'll give you a great example. I hear this all the time from women. They tell me, I don't have any background in finance and accounting. I don't know how to read a balance sheet. I don't really know a lot about that. And I tell them they're not interested in people who can read a balance sheet or make financial decisions because you'll learn it once you get on the board. You don't have to be a subject matter expert. You do want to learn Robert's rules of order because usually in a meeting that is the governing principles about how you move through a meeting.
Not the whole book.
Not the whole book, yeah.
You just need the basics.
Yeah, you just need
the whole book's intimidating.
The Cliff Notes version of how to second a motion and things like that. But a lot of times I see women saying, I don't have any background in that. I've never been on a board. So if I got appointed, what if they asked me questions that I couldn't answer? It will come to you. So don't sell yourself short saying, I don't have a background in air quality. I'm not a physician. The voices that women and mothers and grandmothers bring are so important. So don't sell yourself short because guess what? You'll learn it. Just like when I served on the planning commission, I didn't know an architectural drawing from a layout. I didn't know anything about zoning. But you know what? I learned. I read all that stuff. And when I went to a meeting, Audrey, I was prepared. I would go out to any new development, any site that was being built or being proposed. I would go out. I always wore the wrong shoes and I would like trudge through some mud and go look at a building site. When I went to the meeting, I would say, yeah, I went there. I saw that. It's on this street and that street and it's a busy street, and just familiarize yourself, put in the time, do a little heavy lifting, prepare yourself, learn, and before you know it, they're going to be turning to you going, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I hear from women that they're intimidated because they go to these meetings and it's mostly men on the board, mostly men who are engaged, and that kind of makes them feel less qualified or intimidated or something. What would you advise a woman who maybe gets put on a board and she's the only woman? How would you advise her?
There's actually research to support that, Audrey, that for many years, a lot of corporate boards had no women or one woman. And often those women felt like they didn't have a voice. And it was intimidating to speak up. However, once you find yourself on a board and you're there for a reason and your opinion matters. And so if there's one woman on a board, I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's hard to get the rest of the board members to hear her. However, there is research to support when there are two women on a board, their voice gets a little bit louder. It becomes more of a chorus. And then when you get a critical mass of three women on a board, it actually changes their decision making abilities. So, yes, it's very possible you get on a board and you're the only woman. But guess what? When you're on a board and there's a new opening, you can advocate for other women to get those diverse voices. So, yeah, I agree. It can be intimidating. I have been intimidated speaking up. But you know what? Once you speak up and say respectfully, I disagree with you, and I'm not going to vote to approve this because these are my reasons, and I feel like this is not something I can support. So yeah, you're on that board for a reason. They invited you. Your opinion matters, and yes, sometimes you're going to disagree respectfully with the other people on the board, but that's what we want. We don't want to just go along with like, yeah, well, I didn't really want to speak up. No, you got to speak up. You got to speak up and say, I disagree with you, and I vote no. I've done it. I've been the only no vote. But you know what? I learned to be really proud of my dissenting vote sometimes and be able to say, and here's 4 reasons why I'm not going to support this. So yeah, you develop your voice and it gets louder and it gets more confident. I think it's not easy to be the dissenting vote sometimes.
Right, right. Kudos to you for being strong enough to do that, because that is often hard to not kind of just go along with it, if especially if you're the only woman and it's a little intimidating. So we are almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you, we always ask our guests at the end of this podcast if they have an invitation to the women listening, something they can do now to prepare them to get involved, to join a board or commission, to apply. Do you have an invitation for our listeners?
Yes, I do have an invitation. I think I told you earlier, Audrey, with the organization Boulder Way Forward and with Utah Women Run. On almost a weekly basis, I reach out to women. I invite them to meet with me personally, or in this case, on this podcast, if they're not necessarily in Utah, I will meet with them virtually. But I invite women, reach out to me, call me, set an appointment, and I will take you to lunch. I think I take at least one woman to lunch every week, but I love meeting with them one on one, finding out more about them. And then I will follow up with an email saying, okay, here's 6 boards I want you to look at. And then often I make the phone call to advocate, or I'll do a little digging, I'll do a little research and see if I can't connect them with the right people to get on boards. Because right now, I think it's so important that more women serve on boards across this country and to bring our voice of women, of mothers, of grandmothers. And when a board has diverse voices, women from different backgrounds, different ethnic, whatever, different spiritual perspectives, they make better decisions when you have diverse voices on that decision making board. So yeah, Audrey, if you want, people can reach out to me directly, and I would love to be their advocate.
That's incredible that you take the time to meet with women. You probably don't even know most of them, and
Nope.
get to know them and point them in the right direction. What an incredible service that is that you provide. That's amazing.
It brings me a lot of joy when I can connect the dots for a woman, and next thing you know, she's on a board. So it's my avocation.
I
My
love
favorite
it.
thing to do.
I love it. And I love the joy in your voice when you say that, the excitement. That's fantastic. You're a jewel. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to chat with you and be a part of this podcast. And I'm very genuine in my invitation to women to let me help you overcome any barriers, real or perceived, and get yourself on a board. You'll love it. Once you're on a board, you raise your personal visibility, and then other people will be reaching out to you. I see you serve on that board. Next thing you know, it starts to multiply. Do you know anyone, Audrey, that serves on like 5 or 6 boards? Like, why are you on so many boards? What happens is people see them and say, wow, you make a great contribution to that board. Would you consider serving on this one? So once you get started, you'll be on a lot of boards.
As many as you want.
So thank you so much for inviting me. What a joy.
It was delightful to talk to you, and we'll keep in touch, obviously, through Border Way Forward and everything else, and we'll send women your way when they want to get on a board or commission. Thank you all for listening to the Project Elected podcast. For free resources and materials, head over to projectelectwomen.org. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as Project Elect Women. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate us, or give us a review on iTunes. So until next time, thank you.